Welcome to this Fiction Brain Masterclass on Story Bibles. Here is a question I want you to sit with. When did your manuscript last contradict itself? A character whose eye color shifted between chapters. A death in the backstory the story later forgot. A rule your world established and then violated when the plot needed it to. A timeline that put your protagonist in two cities on the same afternoon. If you have written anything longer than a short story, you have almost certainly done at least one of these. Not because you are careless, because human memory was never built to hold a fictional world at full resolution across months or years of drafting. The Story Bible exists because your memory was never supposed to do that job alone. Here is the principle that changes everything. Your manuscript is a promise system. Every detail you establish is a commitment to your reader. Not a suggestion, not a placeholder, a commitment. This character's eyes are gray. This event happened before that one. This is how the world works. Readers are tracking these rules whether you are or not. They may not consciously catalog every detail, but they feel it in the gut when a commitment is violated. The story they were trusting has just told them it cannot be trusted. There are two kinds of promises in fiction. Explicit promises are the ones your story states directly. A character explains the limits of the magic system. A rule is named out loud. Those are easy to track. Implicit promises are subtler and more dangerous to break. A character who has refused an action 3 times has promised that refusal means something. A city rendered as gray and industrial every time has promised that is what the city is. These are the promises writers break accidentally, because they never wrote them down. The Story Bible is the tool that makes both kinds visible. So what is a Story Bible, really? It is not a pre-writing project. It is not a world-building document you complete before drafting begins. It is not an outline with a different name. A Story Bible is a living reference document that tracks everything your fictional world has established as true. The operative word is living. It grows as the story grows. When you introduce a character quirk in Chapter 8, you add it immediately. When your timeline shifts, you update the log. Think of it as your manuscript's external memory. The story lives in the draft. The Bible lives alongside it. The discipline is not building the Bible. The discipline is keeping it current. Inside the Bible, one section matters more than all the others combined. It is called the promise log. Every time your story establishes a rule, you have made a promise. The promise log is where you record it. Here is an explicit example. Vampires cannot enter a dwelling uninvited. Established in Chapter 4, when the vampire stops at the threshold. Cannot be broken, because the protagonist's defensive strategy depends on it. 3 pieces of information. What was established, where, and why it cannot be violated. 30 seconds to write. Now, an implicit example. Detective Harrow refuses to carry a weapon. Established through behavior in Chapters 2, 5, 9, and 11. No one ever said it out loud. The story showed it 4 times. That is a promise. If Harrow picks up a gun in Chapter 19 without earning that moment, readers will feel the betrayal. Breaking an established rule is not creative freedom. It is a breach of contract. The promise log is that contract made visible. Beyond the promise log, the Bible tracks where consistency fails most often. Characters. The scar in Chapter 3, the speech pattern that makes them distinct. Timeline and chronology, both the story timeline and the backstory that informs it. Setting and world. The smell of the place, the quality of the light. A city that smells like diesel and salt water in Chapter 2 should not smell like pine and wood smoke in Chapter 9, unless the story has moved. Voice and tone. Your point of view, tense, and the texture of your narrative voice. How you build the Bible depends on how you write. Plotters build it before drafting and update every deviation. Discovery writers build it as the story unfolds, like an expedition log. The discipline is immediacy. Document the moment you establish something, before you close the document. Hybrid writers combine both and need a simple end-of-session check. Ask one question. What did I establish today that is not in the Bible yet? 5 minutes of documentation prevents 5 hours of continuity repair. The Story Bible is not bureaucracy. It is not the enemy of creative flow. When you are deep in the zone, you are making promises at speed. The Bible catches those promises before they disappear into the draft. Build it as you write. Keep it current. Log every promise the moment it is made. Your manuscript is making promises on every page. The Story Bible is how you keep them. That is where your reader's trust lives.